Shwmai a croeso cynnes, and welcome to the What's Your Story podcast. I'm James Owen, a Welsh filmmaker and storyteller, and I'm passionate about sharing stories. This podcast is all about business owners sharing their journey, and we'll be speaking with directors, entrepreneurs and creatives from all across Wales to learn from their experiences. We believe everyone has a story to tell. What's your story? Shwmai a croeso cynnes for the next instalment of What's Your Story. I'm really excited today to have a professional photographer in the room. No, it's not me. It's my good friend, Nick Morrish. Good to have you come down at Llanelli, mate.
Thanks, James. Shwmai, how are you? You okay?
Shwmai, very good. What's your Welsh like, Nick?
Dwi'n dysgu Cymraeg, siarad y tipyn bach.
Da iawn.
Diolch yn fawr iawn.
I think that might have been the most Welsh we've had so far. So, well done. You're a fluent Welsh speaker.
Getting there. Yeah, thanks to Duolingo.
Awesome. Duolingo. Nick, really appreciate you coming all the way down to Llanelli. For us, we've known each other for some time. And we've developed a bit of a good relationship, good partnership working in the creative industry. But for those who don't know, that are listening, watching, could you just give us a 2-3 sentence summary of who you are and what you do?
Okay, yeah, cool. So I'm Nick from Morrish & Co. And basically we provide fresh photography and video for businesses in Cardiff, South Wales and around the UK if we need to. Obviously, I specialise in photography for business. If we need to do videos, we get in experts like Stori Cymru.
I wasn't expecting that, but...
That's all right. You can pay me a commission on the way out.
There we go. I'll slip a tenner out the door. But it's fair to say, you as an individual, you are a photographer. You're an excellent photographer. You did our headshots, which I think need updating. They're probably like 3 years old now, but they're so good. They've stood the test of time. So I was quite glad to get you on board when we rebranded. So photography, is that something you always wanted to do growing up, become a photographer?
Do you know what? It wasn't actually. My path to this seat has been, I've been riding the breeze. I'm going to be right up front about that. There are some people in life who I think are laser focused in what they want to do and they're relentless in the pursuit of that. I'm the opposite end of the spectrum. So when I was in school, I was my dad would probably say that I was a relaxed student. I was definitely in school more for the social aspect of it than the grades and the education and stuff. So my story really began age 16, right? And I went into my careers advisor and I can still picture her to this day. I mean, and this is like the mid to late 90s. And she was very old school, very sort of like she was close to retirement and stuff. And I always wanted to be a pilot, right?
Okay, pilot.
So, because my mum was like an air stewardess, and my dad traveled the world, and so travel was a big part of my growing up. And of course, flying planes. Who doesn't want to do that? That's the thing. So I went into the careers advisor, and I said, I really want to be a pilot and stuff. And she went onto this computer, tap, 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 what grades are you getting? Like, tap, tap, tap. What do you like doing? Tap, tap, tap. Anyway, the computer spits out this bit of paper, and right at the bottom, it said he's not going to be a pilot. He hasn't got the grades to do it, right? So it's like, oh, right. Okay.
Really? I never had that in school. That's bizarre.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little bit older than you, James. I don't want to labour it. But yeah, this is how it was. And I think careers advice at that time was still quite primitive, and I think that the prevailing attitude was definitely like more, we need bank managers and we need, shop managers and we need travel agents. There was never photography as a career was not one that was suggested to me. Actually, what was suggested to me was that I'd be a runway technician. And I was like, what does a runway technician do? And it turns out you chase the pigeons off the runway for the pilots. Now, I knew that I didn't want to do that, which, we'll come on to it a bit later, but I realized actually it's a pretty cool job. But more on that later. So I was lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, I didn't really have any calling. And so it was my mum. And of course, at 16, you had to decide what A-levels you wanted to do, which then dictated what you did at uni. So, my mum was like, well, look, there's, this course out there called American Studies. And, the one good thing about it is you get to go and live in America for a year in your third year as part of a study abroad program. And so basically my entire life, 16 to 18 became getting into American Studies. And so age 18, get my A-level results. They weren't quite what they should have been to get me into my first choice university because of my relaxed approach to study. And I ended up going through clearing and getting into the University of Kent at Canterbury. And I tell you what, like, those 4 years of my life were transformative on two fronts. Probably the biggest one is I met my wife there at uni.
Did you?
Yeah. We met in my second year. But then I went to America to study abroad. So we lost touch for 10 years.
Okay. So you didn't get married early on then?
No. I was quite a late.
She was waiting for you.
I was probably waiting for her. I'm probably the lucky one on that front. But no. So yeah, I went off to America. Now, I'm struggling to tell this part of my story without sounding like a raging alcoholic. So the best way I'm going to say this is I'm a second year British university student, right? So where, alcohol, the Students' Union, it's a big part of uni life. But because I was born in July, I went to America and I'm only 20. And of course, the drinking age there is 21. So suddenly I had this huge clump of time, that I didn't have anything to do. Now, I'd always sort of dabbled in photography, and my dad was like a super keen amateur. And so, I'd like borrowed his camera and some manuals and stuff and taken some pictures. There was a Portuguese guy who was a really keen photographer in Canterbury, who I'd sort of like got the bug from a little bit, Anyway, off I went to America with all this time. And the university that I went to was Penn State. And they had a daily broadsheet newspaper that was 22,000 circulation and competed with the local newspapers. But it was all put together by students under the guise of these professional advisors. And not a word of a lie, the interview was incredible. So I was interviewed by the chief photographer, who was a student, and the professional advisor who had been in newspapers, all his life. And I shot this really rubbish portfolio pictures at a rugby tournament like the weekend before. They were like, when I think about them now, they were awful, And I went in and, had the chat and stuff. And it transpired afterwards that the professional advisor had said not to bring me onto the paper. But the chief photographer had said, well, the whole point of university is to broaden your horizons. And what better way of doing that than having a British guy on the staff? Because then the other, college students who are all American might learn something from him. So I got in purely on the fact that I was from Wales and, no photography skill or whatever. But I tell you what, in a weird sort of twist of fate, like the professional advisor now is like one of my really, really good friends, and he's still based in America and we talk quite a lot. I don't speak to the chief photographer much, but he's gone off and been a super successful advertising guy in America, and his work is just incredible. But I suddenly went from not knowing what I wanted to do and genuinely going through university, no idea, to I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked on photography, on press work, because, we were going off and we were doing all sorts of assignments for the college, and there was like hard news. So there's I got maced in America, which was quite an interesting thing, and I went and photographed George W. Bush's inauguration or the protests around it and stuff, so we were doing that like hard news. There were like race riots and protests and stuff that we did. And then there was like the softer like features and sports and things like that. And I loved it. And I think that I loved it because I was just meeting people and finding out their story and their background and stuff. And so anyway, so the year in America came to an end, and I traveled around America a little bit and then came home. And that last year in university, I was like, I know what I want to do. I got to get into photography. So I tried a few different routes. And one of them, I managed to get a little bit of work experience on the Western Mail with the guys there. And it was one of those guys that said, like, you're only going to get a job in press if you go and do what was called the NCTJ press photography course in Sheffield. So I was like, oh yeah, more learning. I'm up for that, back to college I go. So yeah, I went and did that, and it was like 3 months of working there. And this really lovely guy, I mean, sadly he passed away a few years now, but Peter Dash was like the chairman of the NCTJ, but also one of the photographers down in the South Wales Argus in Newport. And a job came up, and he said, oh, look, are there any students that could do it? And I think I got it because I was the only Welsh guy on the course, and, I lived down the road. So yeah, 3 months after starting that course, I was down in Newport working for the Argus. And then, yeah, 4.5 years of, working in press and stuff, and telling people stories through pictures. So I can't remember if that was the question, but
well, there we go. That
was the answer.
It's a nice summary of going to America.
Yeah.
And then finally finding out what you want to do. Right? There's I guess for you, it was the case of, okay, it's a course that somewhat interesting, because let's be honest, are you kind of using your American studies degree? Or maybe it was the thing that got you the opportunity. That's the way you see it?
Do you know what? Hand on heart, I think the only time I use my American Studies degree now is if we're watching like Only Connect or Mastermind, and like one of the questions comes up.
Who's the 30th president of the United States?
Yeah, exactly. And then inevitably I get it wrong because I got such a terrible memory. And then my wife will, go, oh, well, what did you spend 4 years at university doing and stuff? And but this is the thing. And I think that, I think if anybody's watching this, and they might have, sons or daughters or kids or whatever who are at school and they're not sure of what they want to do. It might even be somebody who's sitting in a career and they're like, God, I don't even know how I ended up here. I think I have faith in the fact that there is a force that's taking you to wherever you need to get to, and to be open-minded, I think. And like you say, yeah, American Studies have got nothing to do with photography, but like there was an opportunity there that I took, and it's worked out all right so far.
Well, one thing that's quite good is now in Wales, creative is being recognised as a career path. In your circumstance, when you were back in school, that wasn't an option, right? You wanted to be a pilot, Peter says no. Yeah. Whereas now, youngsters all across Wales are having so much more opportunity because they can be a photographer, they can be a filmmaker, a writer, a songwriter, a musician. All those opportunities are a lot more accessible now, which is quite exciting for young people, because I dread to think if I had that opportunity when I was in school, I think my life would have taken a totally different path. So I don't have regrets, but it would have been, I could have saved a couple of years of my life by going straight out to school, straight into maybe my filmmaking degree. So, okay, so that's a good understanding of you finding out what you really want to do. So you now have this love of photography, which is already there from a young age, but perhaps you didn't realize it. So where did you then channel that next? You thought, right, okay, I'm working in press. Did you just want to keep doing that for a couple of years after you graduated?
Yeah. So I think when I look back to it, I think at the time I wanted to go off and work for Magnum Pictures, and Magnum Pictures is basically this cooperative of photographers that, like, the absolute best photographers in the whole world go and work for Magnum. And, like all of the photographers that I loved, Henri Cartier-Bresson, Elliot Erwitt, Robert Capa, like these guys whose pictures are like super famous. And if anybody is out there wanting to learn about photography or get deeper into it, go and look at those guys' pictures, because the way that they tell stories through their images is absolutely incredible. And, so that was sort of where I wanted to end up. I'm quite behind the confident exterior. I don't think I'm that confident a person. And so I'm quite harsh on myself, and I try and be realistic. And so I'm guessing, as much as I would have loved to have done it, there was part of me that was like, hang on now, Chief, out of all the photographers in the world, there's only a handful of them that go and work for Magnum and stuff. So you have to be a bit more realistic. So I think at the time, I was probably following a well-trodden path of like, you work in a regional newspaper, then you might move up and go and work, for an agency somewhere, like Press Association or Southwest News, and then you go and work for a national. But life, as we know, has a funny way of directing you into different places. And I had a bit of I was in a relationship that went a bit horribly south, and it really, really cut deep, and left me in a bit of a bad place. And I was lost. I was like, I don't know what to do, because it was a psychodrama, right? It was just unbelievable.
Sorry to laugh, a psychodrama.
Yeah, that is the best way to do it. I mean, I think it was my EastEnders moment. Can you get the old doom, 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 doom? Because that was what was happening in my life.
Ask the editor; they are listening.
Yeah.
Can we get some sound effects in?
So I was in a bit of a bad place with that and stuff. And this one of my mates who I grew up with, who's like, he was a wild eccentric. I can't name him because he's quite well known now in business in Cardiff. But he, although having said that, people will probably know because of Iceland, the connection and stuff. So we'll see how this goes. But yeah, so basically he was like, look, you need to get out of this situation. Come up and see me for a few days in Iceland and stay. And when you go on holiday and you're sitting with your other half, the sun's going down, and you're like, God, wouldn't it be lovely to like move here and stuff? And then you sort of laugh it off because you're like, oh, word of a lie. I got the plane up to Reykjavik. The door opened, we not even got off, and I felt the air, and I was like, I'm moving. Like, I made my mind up in that split second. And I'm not a natural risk taker, you're not going to find me bungee jumping or, parachuting or anything like that, or driving motorbikes. So for me to do that was kind of a bit mad. Anyway, I had this great 4 days up there, met a load of lovely people, and then came back, and there was a bit of a scratch that I couldn't itch, or an itch I couldn't scratch. That's the way in it. And so 3 months later, I just packed up the job at the Argus and left and went to Reykjavik. And I didn't have, this is first world problems, isn't it? But I didn't have any. I had a little bit of money, didn't have a job, I had a camera. And in my mind, I was going to Reykjavik to be a freelancer. Now, the very fact that I'm sitting here probably tells you it didn't go to plan. But actually, when I look back on it now, it was one of the best things to ever happen to me, because I think when I look back on it now, not having a plan, not sort of be willing to understand that actually as a photographer, you're a business. You're not just taking pictures. I think all those things. Also start a business in a place where you know the language, because, like Icelandic is a little bit like Welsh. And, so as much as I tried to learn it, actually, I was never going to get anywhere, because, the other photographers in Reykjavik, they were established, but they could speak the language. So I was there for about a year, like sort of knocking about, shooting loads of portraits of like artists and stuff, and not necessarily getting paid, but just like developing my style and things. And as is the way of the world, 2008, something comes along that you can't help. And for me, it was the credit crunch, and the banks in Iceland were particularly badly affected. Like Iceland as a whole was really in a bad way. And so I was then faced with a decision. I was like, well, I need to earn money. Like, I can't exist like this forever. So what do I do? And in my mind, I was like, actually, let me get a job back home. That'll tide me over for 6 months, and then I can come back to Reykjavik. So so I saw this job, and it was for a little agency. that were producing internal comms for what they called a large global travel brand, right?
Interesting.
So I was like, oh, I like travel, And, my mum used to be a stewardess and my dad had traveled. And I was like, I could get involved in that. So I, rock and roll, flew down to Reykjavik, from Reykjavik, down to London, had the interview, flew back. And they offered me the job. And it turned out that the job was as a photographer for this agency, but based at British Airways. And, it was an opportunity that I had to take. And I mean, when I went into it, like hand on heart, I was only going to do it for 6 months because I did have a girlfriend in Reykjavik at the time who, I absolutely adored, and she didn't want to move to London. So, and I didn't want to move to London particularly, but there was part of me that was like, actually, you got to do it because, you need to. And so then 6 months became 10 years, which was kind of a funny sort of journey, really, to be on. But I think a lot of people in business talk about risk and opportunity and stuff, and I think sometimes you have to take a risk and you have to grab those opportunities, even if you don't know how it's going to end up. Because I didn't know how America was going to end up. I didn't know how going to Sheffield was going to end up. I didn't know how being at the paper was going to end up. I didn't know how going to Reykjavik would end up. But there was something that was kind of guiding me along and making sure I was all right. So that was what, start of 2009, February, I started at British Airways.
High risk, high reward.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Which is kind of weird because, like I said, I'm not a high risk person. Like normally I'm quite safe, but obviously there's something in me that every now and again has to just go a bit
throw
wild.
the dice.
Exactly.
So a decade in British Airways, incredible because it is a globally known brand. Everyone knows it, especially across the world. So it has a huge reputation. So that must have been a hell of an opportunity. 10 years taking photographs of airplanes. And what I think is amazing is you wanted to be a pilot and somehow it was come full circle. Okay, you weren't actually, maybe you were in the planes. You were getting to you had opportunities to take photographs of these.
Well, do you know what? This is the funny thing, right? In that I'm not actually an av geek. Like, you won't catch me at the end of a runway, like, checking out the wingspan of a 747 or whatever. I like the physics of flying. I'm fascinated by that. But for me, the best thing about BA was the people, like, the stories. And like, whenever you see reviews of British Airways, it's always about this person was nice, that person was rude, this person looked after me, this person didn't. And that, for me, was the fascinating part of it, is that actually, if you took all of the people out of British Airways, no planes are going anywhere. Like, no airports are operating, nothing is happening. And, as a creative and as a photographer that likes to tell stories with pictures, you've got 40,000 people, each with a different story, each doing something that's fascinating, whether that's the engineer or the pilots or the cabin crew or the people at head office. It was just like, it was just like being in a playground full of toys. It was unbelievable. But funny enough, mentioning the pilot thing, I mean,
did you get to fly a plane?
Not an actual plane. I mean, don't get me wrong, every flight, like, I was waiting for is there anybody that can fly the plane on board? Like, announcement. And it's like, I'd be like, yeah, I'll do it. Because, and one of the lovely things about, human relationships is you get to meet people that, you like, you respect, and, they support you in different ways. And there was this one guy, and obviously BA has, they have to, pilots have to be super trained, and they have like exams every 6 months or a year or whatever that they have to pass, rightly so. So they have this big hall full of flight simulators. Now, if you're a gamer, it's like, it would be heaven, right? Because you go in and the flight deck you could take the flight deck out of a simulator and put it in a real plane, because they have to make the experience as real as possible for when they're practicing different events and things that they need to be aware of, right? So there's a team of engineers then that look after these simulators. And one of the guys that was involved in that team became a really, really good friend, and he was lovely. And I told him the story about wanting to be a pilot and stuff. And so what used to happen was he would ring me up every now and again, and he'd say, Nick, available Friday afternoon, a couple of hours. I say, let me check the diary. There's nothing in there at the moment. Why is that? And he said, look, we've just fixed one of the simulators and we need to test it. So do you want to come and have a fly on the thing? And so I'd be like, yeah, all right. So I put in a diary, photography strategy meeting for the simulator department or whatever it was. And off I'd go with Andy, and we would go off and we'd fly around the world. So I can claim to have sort of landed a 747 at Heathrow, which I think for pilots, I think is probably one of the best things.
Out of how many times you landed, how many times did you crash the sim?
Do you know what? Actually, and I don't know whether it was the pilots just schmoozing me, but anytime I flew with a pilot, they were like, "Oh, you're a natural. You should have got into this and stuff." But I'm like, I don't know. But there was one. I'm going to class it a heavy landing in a simulator. And honest to God, the blood drained from my body because I thought that I'd broken, and these things like 15, 20 million pound toys, not toys, devices. And I was like, oh my God, I've just broken. I'm not meant to be in here. And what am I going to do? But it was just a heavy, it was just a heavy landing. We've all had them, on certain low cost airlines, shall I say, that it's maybe jolted you a little bit. And it was just like that. And I think, the Sims, I think, are quite robust because they move. So as you pull the controls back, they go forward, they mimic the movement of an aircraft. So, there are times when pilots have to bury it, into the runway, and you need that, I think that experience to understand it. So I got to tick the flying box. And then of course, working with the pilots, I think I was probably a bit of a pest, really, because anytime I met up with a pilot, I'd have a million questions about flying and about, how does this work? And what's that button do? And then, but to be fair to them, they would always, because they loved it, because flying is one of those things that I think it is something you do if you love, and if you're paid to do it, you're living in a pretty good, good world. And so they love to share that knowledge. Wherein they always like to tell you when things went wrong as well, which is great when they're talking about a flight you weren't on. But when they're like, you've landed somewhere and you're like, how was that? And they're like, well, we were halfway over the Atlantic and, this alarm went off, and you're like, whoa, hang on. I was just back there sipping my champagne in business class, and it was all, but I think they're, it's comforting to know they're quite relaxed about that stuff. So, so I scratched that itch.
Did you get a fly first class?
I did. Yeah, I didn't pay for it either.
Oh, that's
which
nice.
is the way to do it. The champagne tastes sweeter that way. No, do you know what? I got really lucky on that front. That I flew. I think I flew maybe twice or three times. I think. But yeah, talk about first world problems. I preferred flying business because I think I always felt like I was about to be thrown out of first class. Like that somebody would come down and go, "Hey, hang on, what are you doing here? Like you should be down the back."
Hey, you're from Cardiff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't think I ever relaxed properly in first, but business. Fair play to the airline. We would fly off and. I did like Seoul for 24 hours or Sydney for 2 days. And so, the thought of doing that and being cramped up and not being able to sleep, properly would be quite unfair. So yeah, fair play to the airline for looking after us when we were working and stuff, it was good. It was a good time. It was a good time.
Good times. So yeah, a decade working for British Airways. What are some of maybe your best highlights working for the airline?
Yeah, do you know what? I think there's probably, aside from the travel, I can't talk about BA without talking about travel. And I've been lucky that I've visited every continent in the world apart from Antarctica, basically anywhere where BA went, we went. And that was incredible. And even if you're only getting a few hours in a place, just being able to go and soak up a bit of the atmosphere or taste the food or whatever was amazing. And to be paid to do it. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. I mean, it's not like I'm doing this out of my own pocket, so it made it even better. But like, I think for me, the biggest highlight, and I know it sounds a bit cliched or whatever, it was the people. It was working with the people, because not only like our team, that this incredible human being called Phil Pitt, who's like, he is just an enigma, like super talented, super intelligent, like, and a lovely guy, and a supreme talent spotter, brought this team together of creative people, and that's photographers, videographers, designers, writers, and stuff. So working with those guys was like, it's like working with a team basically. So that was cool. But then the wider airline, and I sort of alluded to it earlier, you had access to so many interesting parts of the airline. So like at one stage, I found myself inside the wing of an A380, which is actually quite big, I mean, I know I'm small, but you do that, or, like, and like the engineers down in Cardiff, incredible. And they'd strip out an aircraft. So you walk on board and there's no seats, there's no bins, there's no carpet, it's just literally the shell. So you were seeing all this stuff and you were sort of like right on the front line of it, which was incredible. Then, like the people, and, like there was one CEO, Keith Williams, who was just a lovely guy. And, like working with him really showed me that actually you can be kind no matter what level you are in life, whether you're at the top or you're at the, at the start, you can be kind to people. And I remember one event, like I'd taken my wife along, and I told Keith, beforehand, and he was like, oh, well, she can come and sit with me, she can come and sit with me. But my wife's pretty shy and she doesn't want to get in the way. And then halfway through this event, he taps me on the shoulder and he's like, oh, is Sarah here? And I said, oh, yeah, she's at the back. She didn't want to disturb you. And he says, well, I'll tell her to come down the front. And so I go and pass the message on. She's like, no, don't want to disturb. So I go back to the front, carry on photographing. Keith said, well, where is she? What's she doing? I said, look, I've spoken to her. She doesn't want to come down. And he got up and he went and sat at the back with her. And like, for the rest of the show. And
this is the CEO of the company.
The CEO of the whole of BA. And he didn't have to, but like that sort of kindness, I think, has left a big mark on me. And I to this day, it makes me smile and stuff. So, it's a highlight. I think having my photograph taken with Buzz Aldrin, which was quite nice. For Gen Z, he went to the moon. Yes, yeah, he did. Yeah, second man on the moon. So there's only one man that can claim that. So that's a pretty good thing to do. There was like celebrities I photographed and stuff, which was good fun.
The Queen.
I photographed the Queen. Yeah, I did. I'm the first to admit, you're not going to catch me putting, Union Jack bunting up and celebrating Platty Jubes or anything like that. But I have to say, like, she had an aura that, I was as close to her, maybe even a little bit closer than we are now. And there was an authority. And even I was a bit like, this is massive, So that was definitely a highlight as well. Do you know what? It was brilliant. And I think I'm so grateful for those 10 years. And when I look back at it now, and I'm like, I can't quite believe. I wonder what the 16-year-old me sitting in that careers office would say to the 44-year-old me going, listen, you're going to have the best career and you're going to go and work for this massive global airline. And, I can't imagine. It would probably be so mind-blowing. I'd be like, yeah, whatever, dude, yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about risk. You had a successful career in British Airways. So talk me through the sort of next steps of your business journey, because you probably in 2020 didn't know very much about business.
No, I didn't. No. Well, do you know what? This is a funny one, because I think something that I picked up in Iceland, I think, is Icelanders have a very strong belief in themselves, and they don't like to be told what to do or how to do it, and not in an arrogant way, and not in a, an obnoxious way, but more in a, like a determined, like, we want to be independent way. And I suppose, if you're living in a rock on the North Atlantic, with a horrible thing, you need a bit of that. So I decided that I was like gonna take my own destiny into my own hands. So in 2019, had a little boy, I was engaged and stuff. And I just didn't want to have other people shaping my destiny. So I chatted it through with my wife and I said, well, look, there will be a reorg at the end of this year. Why don't I take voluntary redundancy? And then we can move down to Cardiff. I'll set up my own business and we'll go from there. So it was a brilliant plan. And like, I think it was Mike Tyson who said, everybody has a plan until they get smacked in the face. And that was true, because I left BA and it was heartbreaking. And, when I look back on it now, it really was harder than I thought it was going to be. But then what made it worse was that we moved to Cardiff the end of January. I was like, great, let's go, business, whatever. 6 weeks later, lockdown happened. And nobody saw it, I mean, my God, like, when I look back at it now, and I'm preaching to the converted, but like nobody saw it coming, and everybody made these plans, and it's suddenly all up in the air. And again, it was one of those things, I took a risk, but then when it didn't quite go to plan, I looked at the opportunity and I went, right, how do you make this good? How do you work this out? And for me, that was looking at the lockdown and going, well, listen, no photographers are working. So suddenly I don't have any pressure of like looking at other people's work and going, oh my God, well, how is so-and-so busy? Like, why aren't I getting work? And having that pressure to actually like, right, what do I need to do to run this as a business and not as a photographer? And again, it comes back to Reykjavik, where I was trying to be a photographer, not a business. And even though it sounds quite cold, you ain't going to be taking pictures if you haven't got the business, set up. And I think if you have those business foundations in place, and I'm not saying to be an expert in everything, because nobody is, but have those foundations, when you do take a risk, it reduces the risk significantly.
So, question for you: how do creatives market themselves?
Badly, I think. And the biggest mistake for me is that I think some photographers. Actually, no, I'm not going to single out photographers. No, I'm going to say creatives in general. I think I'm guilty of it. And I'm sure that if you put your hand
probably
on
in
your
the
heart,
same camp.
Same in the camp, yeah. We're all about the work. We're all about the thing that gets us up in the morning is like, you create videos, I create photography, and you're like, yeah, that's the thing. And I think sometimes when I see other creatives, they're too busy like massaging that sort of brand of like, oh, I'm the struggling or the troubled director, or I'm the poor artist, or I'm the thing. And it's like, actually, no. If you look at it, we're here because of our clients, because our clients need help with creative, and that's how it should be. The client should always be the hero in all of our stories. Not the other way around, like, and that's,
look at me, look at what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong. There are behind the scenes clips from some, production companies and creatives that I love looking at, and I'm like, oh, it's wicked. But then sometimes I'm just like, actually, I want to see the work. Like I almost feel like we need to be a little bit invisible, and it's not about us. It is about the client and what the work's being produced.
I think there's a bit of a balance, right? Because if you're so humble, you don't talk about yourself and you don't big yourself up. And, there are times where we do need to sell ourselves.
Yeah.
But you don't want to oversell and come across too confident that it doesn't show that you care about the client.
Yeah.
There's a balance on social media where you sell yourself, where you just don't want to. Sometimes it can be a vanity project, isn't it? You just put things up so it can be seen.
Yeah.
But for me, I would much rather, any marketeer that's listening is probably going to say terrible advice, but I'd rather post something that has a meaningful purpose not just post something for the sake of it.
Like, do you know what? I'm gonna step away from creatives for a second, and I'm gonna pick on social media experts. Right now, something that I will not understand, and I'm quite happy because I come from a particular generation where it was all different. I don't understand social media. Some of it I don't like, if I'm honest. But like, I get amazed that sometimes you get, your phone goes off and it's like, social media expert marketing has just started following you. And you're like, all right, wicked. I'll have a little look at them because I'm interested in people and can this person come and help me? Then you look and they got no posts. They've got like 1,000 followers. And it's like, how am I meant to know what your social media work is like if you haven't got anything to back that up? And then, of course, like taking that in extremis, I think there are, I think it's not so prevalent in South Wales, but certainly out in the wider world, you see some people that are like, oh, hey, I'm a content creator. Oh, God, I hate that phrase, content creator. It's like, it's so beige. It's like, be specific. You do video, I do photography. Like, let's live in that world, not content, because it could be anything.
Well, that's the thing. It could be video, it could be photography, it could be creating graphic. You're a graphic designer.
Graffiti artist, like... painting letters in the sky with an aircraft is a content creator. Like my 8-year-old son is a content creator. He draws crude pictures of human beings. He's a content creator. And I think have a little bit more I think maybe it comes down to that humility thing of just being like, actually, don't be humble. Like say, look, I'm a specialist video guy. I'm a specialist. But no, you go to these people and, you look at it and it's just reels of them like going, oh, look at doing all that, and looking at that and then talking to the client. And it's like, well, that's great. And you do need an element of that. You do need to show a little bit of how you operate on a set. But at the same time, show me what you're taking a picture of, because what good is it that you're fantastic looking down, down a viewfinder when I don't know that the work that you create, is good. Like I say, that's not everybody. There's some production companies that do the mix really, really well. Story Cymru being one of them, because we see, genuine, because we see you and your personality behind the scenes, but then we also see the work and we understand the complete package of what we're getting. We know what you're going to get when you turn up at a job. We know what we're going to get when the video comes through. So
if I go back to lockdown, because for me, that's kind of where my business really took off, because I saw it as an opportunity. I didn't really see or look at the competition. I just thought, do you know what? There are lots of people, lots of businesses that are now having to look at their marketing because they're not getting customers through the door. So they've got this abundance of time to look at the website and look at their branding. And for me, that was, prime opportunity to really build relationships with some of these businesses and just go, well, hey, when, if you ever need some video, in my early days, I was sort of doing the hard sell, knocking on doors, sending emails, if you need something, let me know. I've since learned as I developed in my sort of networking that, there's certain ways of how to be effective and how to build those relationships naturally, not just go straight up to someone at an event and go, well, here's my card. Yeah, you need a video. Yeah, give me a call. That just doesn't work. But in my experience, I was trained to hard sell. So before I set up my business, so I had to retrain myself on how to sell. But there was great opportunity in lockdown for me to find business. And that's what I met you. We somehow got connected on LinkedIn. And,
we didn't we?
I could see you as a competitor, which in some aspects you are, right? So we have this healthy relationship of we understand what our strengths are, and I bring you in on what are my weaknesses, and likewise when you need some support. But also we hold each other to account. So we've built up a good working relationship from that in lockdown. And for me, I just saw great opportunity that, you could look at that situation and go, oh, well, actually, we're all locked in our houses and nobody can work and all doom and gloom. But if you flip it, and yes, I've taken a risk to set up this business, but I'm going to see more opportunities that are and just work my socks off to try and make it work. And if you work hard, I'm a big believer, if you work hard, you will get rewarded.
Yeah,
if you sit on your backside and just expect something to work, it's not going to work. If you work hard, you will absolutely be rewarded.
Absolutely. And I think on this point of competition, I find this really interesting because if you go on LinkedIn, I mean, you will find a business. Now, I'm not a business coach. I'm not a business expert, right? This is just my opinion. But you'll find a business coach and they say, oh, yeah, competition, don't be afraid of it. Like, reach out to your competition. Is there like synergy that you can get? But actually, I'm like, dude, I think actually be a bit more personal about competition. Now, the way that I feel about competition, outside, it probably appears I'm quite a confident person. On the inside, I'm not. I'm really, really not. I'm constantly judging myself against other people. Like I see other pictures or videos. I'm like, oh God, why is mine not as good as that? And stuff. So, competition for me is a really difficult thing. So I've sort of taken a very personal approach to it. There are times when somebody will reach out to me and I will give it the time and the attention and stuff. And you're a prime example of that. That, yeah, you're exactly right. Our two companies, the Venn diagram is pretty much, it's 100%. Like we have the same sort of clients, we have the same sort of services and stuff. But I think the way that
that Venn diagram is slowly like two circles on top of each other.
Exactly, yeah. But I think that it comes down to, I was always impressed by your attitude and the fact that I heard your name coming up quite a lot. And also that you weren't doing pictures of you behind the camera being the tortured artist or director or whatever. And so I find it easy to, yeah, and like you say, we've worked together on stuff and and it's been good and it's going to carry on. Whereas there's other people that I'm just like, oh, do you know what? I just have a bad vibe about it. And I'm like, do you know what? That's all right. Because I'm sure there's people that look at my work, the photographers, and they're like, oh, that's rubbish, or I don't want to work with him, or he doesn't look like my sort of person. That's fine. And I think that's the biggest thing in business is like, I think you have to be individual, and especially in terms of risk and opportunity, is like, don't be dictated to by other people. Do what you think is right. And if the way that you like to work is like I do, and just be taken on the breeze and see what happens, that's cool. Like, you don't have to have a 5-year business plan. You don't have to have a big photographic agency by the time you're 25. You don't have to be driving a Maserati by the time you're 30 if you don't want to. If you want those things, maybe you do need a strategy. Maybe you do need a 5-year plan. Maybe you do need whatever it is. But anybody starting out a business, my advice is be yourself. You can't be anybody else. Don't be dictated to by other people, and just do it your way and you'll be fine.
That's great advice.
That's the soundbite for the Insta reel, isn't it?
That is the soundbite. That is the soundbite. Okay, well, this podcast, Nick, is all about business stories. We've had a fantastic journey into yours becoming a professional photographer. So I'd love to hear, whose story would you love to listen to? Now, that could be somebody influential, that could be somebody inspirational, somebody inspired you to start your business. We've had that on the podcast. People have really inspired them to start their own businesses. Who could that be for you?
So I'm going to just scratch my beard and check my note on my hand in case this question came up. No, so this is a little bit niche, but again, for any young photographers specifically out there who, maybe they're just in college, maybe they're coming out of college or whatever. I am a huge fan of the old masters of photography. And one of my favorite photographers is this guy called Elliot Erwitt. And I think I would love to hear his story. I think he's sadly passed away now, but have a look at his work because he's famous for quite a lot of pictures and stuff. But the one series that I always think about is he did a series about dogs, and he basically would photograph dogs, but being very, very human, but in a very, very funny way. And there's pictures you look at his picture and you burst out laughing because it's just done in such a lovely way. And I think I would find it fascinating to hear his story and understand what he went through and like, to devote part of your life to that, taking pictures of dogs. Like, how do you do it? And obviously he was a successful photographer, and he worked at Magnum, so he turned that creative love into a profession and managed to keep it a creative love and not let the business take over. So yeah, Elliot Erwitt.
Good. That's a nice one. One I'm gonna have to check out later for sure. Okay. Now, I'd love to hear how maybe those that are listening and watching, how can Morrish and Co. help their businesses?
Well, we can direct you back to Stori Cymru for all your I mean,
I don't have a nice studio I can take.
I don't know. This is pretty nice here. There's two ways. So basically, if you're a business that wants some headshots and portraits that sort of mix a little bit of creativity but are suitable for business, come and have a chat. If you do need some video, come and have a chat. if you get unlucky and it's me doing it, then, I can help out with the video. But otherwise, the and co bit is really important for me, because what I want to do and what we're getting to is getting a little community of creatives together so that, we can be like an agency. Morrish & Co. could be like an agency, but without the beanbags, and more importantly, without the huge price tag that can come with a full production agency, because it means that we can flex the projects up. So it's like, do you know what? If you just need a piece of camera, that's one person and one camera. Yeah, all right, I can take care of that.
If you don't need 6 crew to do that, do you?
Yeah, exactly. If you need a full-blown Jurassic Park, then I get James from Stori Cymru in, and his team of 6 people and stuff to come in. And because I think that, that's what I'm trying to do, is like photography and video in business these days is so important and professionally produced. It can definitely live alongside stuff that you do on your iPhone. But you can get into the trap of being overcharged for something. And I'm like, no, it's got to be affordable, because you need the both. So that's that one side of it. The other side of it is F36 Studio. So if you're a creative and you're watching this and listening, it's an affordable space in Cardiff where you can come in for a few hours or 8 hours or whatever you need, bring your creative vision to life, and we want to make that happen. Depending on when this goes out, we might have moved, and it might be a different name of a studio. But
if you do move, you're not going very far, are you?
No, literally down the corridor. So, an F36 studio will always be a part of what we do and stuff. So, watch the space for the new name, F36. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it'd be like Prince, and I'll just have a symbol instead of a name.
Who knows? Well, if the branding changes, that's all good, because they can always reach out to you, Nick Morrish, or they can reach out to Nick at Morrish & Co. What's the best way to get into a conversation with you, Nick? Are you on Instagram? Are you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I'm a self-certified LinkedIn pest, I think, and I'm on there 4 or 5 days a week. So yeah, if you're in business, probably LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me. And if you send me a message, I will always reply. And you know what? I mean, aside from the photography and aside from all that, I just love meeting people. So, I met somebody the other day who I think was a bit worried that I was going to hard sell them. And they were a bit stunned. And I was like, I just want to find out about you and like what you do. And like, maybe we won't work together. It doesn't matter, because I just find it interesting what you do. And it turns out his life was pretty rock and roll. So I was like, yeah, it's a good one to have.
So yeah, a good story then.
Yeah. And I know some good coffee places in Cardiff. So yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Well, Nick, thank you for coming down. Really enjoy this conversation. To hear you go from flying and crashing simulated planes to now actually owning a credible business in Cardiff. And long may that continue. And if anyone's listening and you want an event captured, we've got a solid team of film and photography to come and do that for you. But Nick, thanks for coming down to Llanelli. And excited to hear more about where the studio goes in the months to come. Thank you for coming down.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much.